Hi, all. I'm Trisha Peach, host of the Peach Buzz, and I'm really excited you guys have come back to join us again today. And this is one of those days I love where we have a guest on the show with us. If you're some of my northern friends, we got nearly 12 inches of snow this last weekend. So, woo, I'm happy that the sun is coming back. It's getting a little warmer. Well, a little while back, I made a new friend. I was working on my research for my doctorate, and I was writing a paper on why pastors leave ministry and don't come back. And that was where I first connected with Janine. And Janine was amazing at giving me honest feedback for she was one of my I don't want to say research subjects. That's not nice, but she
Research
filled out
rats.
the surveys for my research. And I just recently was able to publish my research, which has been great. Well, not long after that, Janine said, "Hey, can you review my book that is about to come out?" And I thought, well, how awesome is that? She's got a book coming out. Just so you know, as far as children's ministry goes, people always say, well, I would like to write a book about something kids ministry related. Is the market saturated? No, there are not enough books for kids ministry. We are a niche market. The problem there is something like 25% of the whole world is kids, and 68% of them have yet to hear about Christ. Therefore, we have a massive, so crucial mission field and not enough workers. And so I'm always happy when a kids ministry book is coming out that can inspire and empower us. So let me introduce you to my new friend, Janine, and I would love it. Could you tell them a little bit about yourself and what you've done in ministry?
Sure. If you listen to me for a second, you'll probably realize I'm not from America. I'm originally from Australia. I was a high school teacher and moved over to America to do some further studying on my master's degree. Met my husband, had 3 kids. We planted a church. My husband was a pastor. We moved to a bigger church. Then we moved to Colorado about 10 years ago. And during that time is when I was plugged into children's ministry as the director there at the church. So I was there for 3 years, and it turned out, which I kind of knew going in, that it was kind of a toxic scenario with the new pastor. I survived 3 years, which was further than what most staff members were doing. They were averaging about a year. And then I stepped out. I felt it was healthier for the church, since I realized that the pastor wasn't going to change. And so better that I step out, which was really difficult because I loved my job. I loved it. And within a week for me, in areas that I'd always wanted to do, I always wanted to teach at a school, at a college level or higher. And it's funny because our daughter at the time was at Colorado Christian University, and I spoke to one of the professors there, and they said, bottom line, if you're going to teach in the area of theology, you need your doctorate. So I'm like, okay, looks like I'm doing my doctorate. So I started that year. And because I was doing that, I reached out to my advisor and said, any chance I could teach a class at the school? And he said, as a matter of fact, yes. I started out as a teaching assistant, and then I transitioned to, I helped another professor teach a class. And this summer I'll be teaching a class to both undergrad and master's level students on children's ministry, which is my dream. So long story short, as I was prepping, like every professor, they turn their notes into a book, right?
Yes.
So I'm like, I'm just going to write a book on children's ministry. And
Yes.
It's funny you said what you said before, because the first thing that came to my mind after I thought that was, this is going to be a really boring book because everybody's written about the basics of children's ministry. I can't do that. You've got to have something original. So I continued to read, and it wasn't long after that I came across a footnote in an article that mentioned Generation Alpha. And I'm like, who is that? I'd never seen it before. I'd seen Z's, Generation Z, Millennials, X's, all that sort of stuff. I'd never seen Generation Alpha. So I did some research from that footnote. And sure enough, the guy who he had quoted was Mark McCrindle, who's an Australian. He's an
Oh,
Australian social researcher. So he spends his time doing a little bit like Barna Research does over here in America.
yes.
He does that in Australia. And
Oh,
he was the one that came up with Generation Alpha label. Surveyed people around him and said, we've got a new generation coming, born from 2010 to 2024. What will we call them?
mm,
And people threw in their answers. And for the most part, he didn't like them. He didn't want them to be Generation A, even though it was the beginning of the alphabet. So he decided to go with hurricane names. You know how hurricanes are named?
yes. Well,
And so he came up with Alpha.
oh, okay.
So he did,
Wow.
at that point, he didn't know if it would stick, but I think it is
Yes, it
sticking.
has, definitely.
Yeah. So I thought that's what I want to write about, because it's no one's writing about that yet in the context of American children's ministries. So I contacted
Ah,
him and I said, are your statistics, do you think they're the same for America as Australia? He said, absolutely. I said, have you done any
yes.
research in the area of churches and children's ministry? He said, no. And this is a Christian guy, but he hasn't done it specific. So that's where my
Right.
book came from. Started looking into a lot of his research. He's written a really good book that has just been released. I got a hold of the ebook last August, and that's where I started looking and thinking, how can we adjust our ministries for this new generation?
Oh my goodness, this is so crucial because I'm having this thought while you're talking. There are lots of books out there about Generation IY and Gen
Yes,
Z, but
yes,
Gen Z is about to graduate out of high school. So
yes,
everybody listening to this right now, the children's pastors and the family pastors that are listening to this show right now, the kids you're ministering to are Generation Alpha. They're Gen
yes,
Alpha, and we know so little about the research is there, but at least here in the United States, we aren't talking about it enough. We aren't
correct.
aware. So in your book, you're talking about characteristics of Generation Alpha. That
Mm-hmm.
sounds very interesting to me. Shouldn't we know more about the generation that we are supposed to reach?
Correct. And one of the quotes I came across in my reading, trying to think who it was at this point, I don't remember, but they said one of the biggest mistakes that we can make in children's ministry is to keep repeating the same programs we've done in the past that have been successful, but without thinking about how to adjust them for this new generation. And if you think about it, Generation Alpha right now are aged between 0 and 12.
Yep.
Their generation ends 94, so the youngest have not yet been born.
Oh,
They're
wow.
going to be the largest generation ever on planet Earth,
Oh, my goodness.
population wise. And they're the kids that are in our ministries. They're not, and if you read
Mm,
articles and stuff that come out now, they're talking about Z's all the time, but nothing about alphas. And
that's
think
right.
about it. I asked my kids, I've got a Generation Z and two millennials, and I asked them, when did you get your first devices? And my oldest two said, we got them when we were in high school
Right.
and we used them for school. And they didn't have any social, they were nearly adults. And my youngest, who's now 18, pretty much said the same thing. She said, our computers were designed for education, but alphas have been born into a world that is technology everywhere, and
Yes.
they are the only generation that's ever had that. I went to a restaurant the other day with my husband, and we were sitting, and there was a family to the side of us with two young girls. And I saw on the table that the restaurant had provided activity sheets, coloring sheets. You know, when you take your
Yes.
kids to a
Yes.
restaurant, you
Oh,
get kids'
yes.
menus, you flip them over, and there's a picture. And
Yeah.
they had crayons. And what were they doing? Sitting on iPads.
Yeah. They even have games now for babies and toddlers on a tablet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I read that Gen Alpha, they do not know a world. They have no memory of a world with screens they can't touch. So not just
Yes,
screens, but touch screens.
correct.
They don't have a memory of a life before touch screens. They also they don't understand a world that you can't get information instantly, or that you can
Yes,
speak something like, I don't want to say it out loud, hey, Alexa, and it will do what you want it to do, turn on lights or whatever it is.
right, right.
but I loved what you said there. If somebody's taking notes, you should have written down what she just said about the worst mistake you can make in children's ministries to continue the programs that were tailor-made for Gen Z and millennials. I've said this before too. If you were going to be a missionary to China and you just went over and didn't do any research at all and screamed at them in Russian the entire time and then say, well, it's their fault. I tried and they won't listen because they're naughty or they're bad.
That's great.
No,
Yes.
if you're going to be a missionary, then you better learn the culture and you had better speak the language.
Yep. Yep.
This is really cool. And by the way, what I've read part of her book, she let me see part of it before it came out, was really great. And what I loved the most about it was that you were using stories. You were using very vivid imagery and stories, and that's my favorite way. That's what Jesus did when he told stories when he taught. So can you tell me, what was your inspiration behind writing this book? You know, you said most people that get their doctorates, they end up publishing their research, which is true. But unlike mine is very dry. The book is very, very technical and dry. Yours is a lot of fun with this rich imagery. What was your passion behind wanting to get this book out there? And I know you are passionate for this book and this project. What was your inner drive for wanting to get this out there?
Well, it's funny you say about technical. I feel like my book is research intense. And as I went back through and I wanted to lighten it a little, but it's 275 pages long, so that's a fairly long book. I'm actually right now thinking how about writing a book for parents that will be a little shorter and many more stories. So this one was to help educate children's directors and children's pastors about this generation, and then to think about how can we adjust our ministries for these kids.
Yes.
And when I was writing it, I was trying to think, what do I do for a title? I know that's super important. And my oldest daughter, whose home I'm at right now, who just had twin baby alphas.
Congratulations, by the way, they're adorable. I've seen pictures on Facebook.
Boys, my favorite alphas on the planet right now. She said, Mom, why don't you call it When You See Fireflies? And I'm like, what are you talking about? She goes, remember when we lived in Pennsylvania and we had the big backyard and it was swampy at the back? Jonathan, our younger son, and Hannah would go out and they would want to go out and play. And they said, when do we have to come inside? And I would say, when you see the fireflies, when you see them flashing, that's an indicator that it's getting dark. So the kids are running around playing, right? They don't have watches. They didn't have cell phones to tell them the time. So they wouldn't have come in at 7. So they needed something when they were fully absorbed in their play to distract them and get their attention. Yes. And when the fireflies got bright, which was for a short time, that would tell them, come on inside where it's safe. It's getting dark right now. And I thought about that. I thought, the world is getting dark. We need to flash our signals out in that world to call the children in where it's safe, where the only person that can save them from the dangers of this world can rescue them. And that's our job. And so that's kind of where the title was born. And the book started. She writes the foreword in my book.
Wow.
So I went and learned a lot about fireflies. They need the right environment. Our environments are important. They need the right time of day. They need the right climate. And it just kind of fit. And I know when you write a book, you probably know that your title is supposed to not be cryptic. Mine is very cryptic, but hopefully the subtitle explains everything, equipping parents effectively to Generation Alpha.
Well, I love the title, and I thought the story, because she tells the story of how she came up with the title in the book, and I thought, oh, that's so beautiful that comes from her daughter. But I love that, if you didn't catch that, she's talking about how When You See Fireflies was when her kids had to come inside. And so it's kind of like Jesus said, we're supposed to be shining a light that draws kids in, saying, here's a safe place where you are safe and you can hear about Jesus. And I believe,
Yes.
Jesus said, let the children come to me. You just get the barriers out of the way and they come. They come
Yes.
to Jesus. They don't seem to have all the hardness that the adults do. And I also noticed that you mentioned coming in to be safe in the darkness. My goodness, some of these kids face more before they're 10 than I have in my whole 45 years of life. I can't even imagine. I did not grow up in a time of the fear of school shootings, fear of I mean, my parents had some fears of maybe kidnapping, but I still played outside all the time. I played outside most of the time. I did not have I mean, mental health and the suicide rates have gone up 8 times over since I was in high school.
Yep.
8 times over. It's when you talk about a safe place, these kids are bombarded with so much more than I ever was.
Yep.
So then it would be very important for us to be shining our light.
Yeah. Yeah.
You talk about our environment being so important, the climate, all of those kinds of things that we need to work on and prepare, and we need to arm ourselves with some information about Generation Alpha, I would say.
Yep.
So if there's there's children's pastors and family pastors watching right now, some senior pastors even, and youth pastors, what would you tell them would be a good, we don't want to take away from what's in the book, but what are 1 or 2 tips you could give them that would be just some starters on making their church a better environment for Gen Alpha?
Sure.
What do you think?
So, obviously, Gen Alpha and the whole technology issue is big. When you see a child run across the floor and they're holding an iPad in their hand and you can't get it away from them. In fact, there's a quote in my book that is from Mark McCrindle. He talks about a mom of a 9-year-old and said, what would happen if she broke her iPad? And the mom said it would be devastating for her. That's her most precious possession. So we can't, and a girlfriend here said, I can't get them away from my grandchildren. What can I do? And I said, to deny technology is impossible. It's surrounding them. It is not going away. It's everywhere. So to try to remove it from their life is naive. So I think what we need to do in the church is we need to embrace technology to a degree. And I loved what you said earlier about touchscreens. This generation of children are very hands-on. They want experiences. I noticed that with my millennials and Gen Z kids. They wanted, instead of buying something, they wanted to go and do something.
Oh, that's good.
To create memories. And I think this new generation, they're very touch hands-on, and that's the way we need to teach them. So
that's great.
So perhaps one way we can do that, which some people might go, oh no, is instead of standing up front and holding a Bible in my hand and reading from it, show them that it's on my phone. So I'm going to read from my phone right now. See, this is the Bible. Yes. And if you've got preteens, they may have a phone in their pocket, pull it out, say, let's download a Bible app and learn how to use the Bible. Then you can carry the Bible with you everywhere you go. So we take the good parts of technology and incorporate it in our lessons. That would be the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is the flip side of that, to balance it with relationships. We know that kids need good relationships, but this generation even more so. I think they are the most engaged generation on social media, yet they're the loneliest ever. And they need mentors, valuable, caring, loving adults that feed into their life the good parts. And that's where, as children's pastors, we can do that with our leadership teams and our teachers. Instead of teaching only from the front, put them in circles. They learn better in circles. Then have them in circles, talk with them, throw out a question and let them talk. Let them discover the answer for themselves. and
Oh,
think through the issues. So that is kind of like the opposite of technology. So I think we need a balance between the two. We need to incorporate it to a degree, but to just put a video on all the time and only do that is, I think, not going to grab them at all. They're used to that. It's impossible to compete with the world's technology. They've got everything right at their fingertips. They can find out
yes.
all the information they need right there anonymously and quickly, instantly. So while we want to incorporate technology, we definitely need to focus on relationships, I think, more than ever
Yes.
before.
Yes, because I felt like I've heard children's pastors say, we can't compete with the iPad and everything else. And what I said was, we have something they can't get anywhere else. And that would be
Yes.
those honest, true relationships with, I love what you said about a mentor, an adult that believes in them, that they can actually interact with, that cares about them, and friends their own age that hopefully they'll grow in faith together with.
Yes. Yep.
They can't, I just believe strongly, you can't get community, real community, just over a screen. That having that interaction is so important. And that's something
That's what's, yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, that's what's so amazing, is that they are the most engaged ever on technology, yet they're the loneliest. How is that possible? So there's obviously a missing component there. And technology enables you to put forward a that you want to show. It doesn't necessarily show who you are. And I think when you've got actual relationships, that's where that comes out.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your passion and your heart. But more than that, thank you for being obedient to the Holy Spirit who led you to write and put your gift out there. And that makes me interested in the next one you're going to write. But I know right now you're at your daughter and son-in-law is on twin feeding duty, and I only had one at a time, so I cannot even imagine. I was in a blind zombie phase for a while.
Yep.
It was bad, but I'm going to put the link right down here below. Please go check out Dr. McNally's book, and I think you should all get a copy. Get one for the people in your ministry, the people that are serving under you, because they need to know this too. They need to know who they're ministering to. They need to know this generation. Maybe get a copy for your senior pastor.
That would be good.
We assume our senior leaders just know all of this. They've got a lot on their plate. I think give them some information on what you're actually doing, what you're up against, what things are happening in the kids ministry. So click down below, get yourself a copy for you and some of the other people in your life. Let us know what you think. Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. I read every comment and I love it. What if they want to ask you a question, Janine?
They can go to my website, Grace for Kids, Grace for the number 4 and kids with a Z. I tried to get kids with an S. It was already taken. So it's Grace for Kids on the front page of my website. So after I wrote my book, I wrote a short ebook, which summarizes a lot about Generation Alpha. It doesn't give all the solutions, but talks about them. It's on the first page of my website. It's free.
Oh, neat. And here. So if you're listening to this and go, wait, and you had a question that you want to ask Dr. Janine, I want you to click right down below here and you can go to her website and check it all out and ask her that question.
And I do need to make clear, it's not doctor yet. It's coming
soon.
soon. Yep, soon, very soon.
I believe in you. You got it. All right. Thank you everybody for tuning in again this week. Thank you for what you do for Jesus and his kids. We will see you next week on the Peach Buzz. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Trish.